Rana, do you want to start?
Okay, so we shall
Hello.
start. It's already three minutes. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rana. My name is. Do you hear me? Is it all is
Yes.
fine?
Yes.
Basma?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
great. Okay, so my name is Rana Rizkalla Faris, and I am pleased to welcome you all on behalf of the Institute of Finance on this webinar, Harnessing the Power of Public Procurement for the Climate Action, What Lessons for Lebanon? That is concurrent with a new era for our country following the election of a new president and the nomination of a new government after more than 2 years of political vacuum. Today, Lebanon is in a post-conflict period, preparing for recovery and reconstruction. And this is where efficient and good public procurement is a crucial policy instrument and an enabler for economic recovery and sustainability, as the way public funds are spent has direct impact on public finance, the economy, and the society. So getting exposed to global experiences in this field is momentous for Lebanon at this stage. In Lebanon, the new public procurement law, as you know, offers a window to implement sustainable public procurement and green public procurement, as it provides a leverage for economic development by ensuring small and medium enterprises the right to fair and transparent participation in government contracts and including sustainability criteria related to environment, but also it directs the Lebanese state's procurement capacity when possible towards sustainable goods and services with a view to minimize the environmental impact and achieve economic and social objectives. The Institute of Finance, our institute, is organizing this webinar within its mandate, so by the law, for continuous capacity building and awareness raising on procurement good practices, especially in what pertains to the role of public procurement in achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. We are thankful to our esteemed speakers for joining us today. Mrs. Sanda Jugo, Policy Analyst in the Infrastructure and Public Procurement Division, OECD Governance Directorate, who is replacing Mr. Paulo Magina, who had a last-minute impediment. Professor Stephen Vanguard, the Head of Research Unit Administrative Law and Public Administration, University of Hasselt. Mrs. Lisbeth Cazier, Lead, Public Procurement and Sustainable Infrastructure Policy, International Institute for Sustainable Development. Allow me also to introduce my colleague Basma Abdel Khaliq, moderator of the webinar. Basma is Senior Economist and Program Manager at the Institute. She has been involved in policy research and dialogue, capacity building, and fostering cooperation with international development partners to serve the advancement of public procurement reform. She coordinated the implementation of the MAPS assessment. She is working on the implementation of the National Strategy on Public Procurement Reform at the level of the Institute's mandate pertaining to continuous capacity building of stakeholders in public procurement. Basma also completed master's studies in international cooperation and foreign policy at Sciences Po, Université Saint-Joseph in Beirut. She holds a master's degree in public governance from Universidad de Granada in Spain and a bachelor degree in economics from Université Saint-Joseph de Beirut. She is certified anti-corruption fellow from the American Anti-Corruption Institute. Basma, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Rana, for this introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see all of you, colleagues from institutions we work with from the public sector, business community, academics, our trainers, CSOs, and international partners as well. This reflects the high interest in our subject of today's discussion, green public procurement or public procurement for the climate action. That I have the pleasure to moderate today. On a quick logistical note, please note that we will be allocating time for question and answers. So we encourage you all to write your questions in the chat box anytime during the webinar. This session is recorded, will be available later for reference on our website, on our YouTube channel as well. In case you disconnect from internet, please use the same link to reconnect again. Allow me please to put the frame of our discussion with a few words to put you in context why we are organizing this webinar, why today, and why we are also inviting all the stakeholders who are concerned with public procurement to join us and to have a lively discussion and exchange about it. So over the last two decades, as you know, public procurement has undergone a significant transformation. It moved beyond its traditional tactical role to a strategic function to address horizontal policy objectives, including economic, social, environmental, and climate-related concerns. In the MENA region, our region, public procurement constitutes between 15 to 20% of GDP. So its role is very important in driving economic growth and development. According to recent studies, public procurement activities contribute to up to 15% of total greenhouse gas emissions. That has an impact on our climate and our livelihood. So on climate change, Lebanon is among the countries least prepared to face climate change. Its limited adaptive capacity, exacerbated by the economic and financial crisis, is the primary source of its vulnerability to climate change. This is according to the latest World Bank climate report on Lebanon. In 2022, Lebanon ranked 161 out of 192 countries in terms of readiness to face climate change. Climate change impacts are projected to reduce Lebanon's growth potential by up to 2% annually by 2040 and impede service provision, especially in water and energy, hindering growth in key sectors like agriculture and tourism. Aligning Lebanon's recovery, the economic recovery we are talking about after the war now, with cost-effective climate action between 2024 and 2030, we require that Lebanon invest an estimated 7.6 billion in 4 key economic sectors: in energy, in water, in transport, and in solid waste. So green public procurement as a policy instrument offers an opportunity to align procurement practices and the power that government has through procurement with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially the SDG number 12. However, we know that the implementation has a lot of challenges, including the complexity of introducing green criteria, life cycle costing, performance clauses, the capacity of the institutions, and monitoring practices. So this is why we need to increase awareness in Lebanon about it and start working on leveling up the technical capacity of institutions and of the market to be able to implement GPP. So in this context, we are organizing this discussion. We are very pleased to have experts who are very engaged in this field from the OECD, from the IISD, and also from the UN Economic Commission for Europe. So I will introduce our speakers very briefly before addressing them the questions, so we can start a discussion today. Ms. Sanda Jugo, she is a policy analyst in the Infrastructure and Public Procurement Division at the OECD Governance Directorate. She focuses on policy issues related to strategic public procurement, including green procurement, innovation procurement, and competition. Prior to joining the OECD, she worked as a procurement specialist at the World Bank. She holds 2 master's degrees in procurement law from the George Washington University and the University of Montpellier. Professor Dr. Steven Van Gars, also welcome to our webinar for our first collaboration. Professor Van Gars is an international authority in the field of procurement and concession law. For nearly 10 years, he was the manager of Public-Private Partnership Knowledge Center in the Flemish government in Belgium. where he was involved in almost all major Flemish PPP's projects. He is the full professor of law and vice dean at the Faculty of Law, Hasselt University in Belgium, where he teaches courses on public and administrative law, government contracts, and public-private law. He is also a lawyer at the Brussels Bar and vice chair of the Committee on Innovation, Competitiveness, and Public-Private Partnership at the UN Commission in Geneva. Ms. Lisbeth Cazier, also welcome to our webinar. She has an expertise in public procurement and sustainable development. She leads the work of the International Institute for Sustainable Development on SPP with the infrastructure and finance team. She heads the research and advisory work with governments for using public procurement strategically to deliver on the SDGs. She also provides training on the topics. She is coordinator of the Nature-Based Infrastructure Global Resource Center and previously worked with the UN Environment Program. So welcome again to this discussion, and we hope that it will also bring the interest of more and more people. So I repeat and encourage our participant and esteemed audience to place any question or any comment in the chat box. Okay, so I will start with my first question to start with the OECD work on this topic. So Mr. Sanda, the OECD 2015 recommendation on public procurement called for a balanced approach in the use of procurement to achieve economic efficiency and strategic objective. Could you please tell us how is public procurement used to generate environmental benefit in favor of the climate action, how this is done, and according to your surveys and data and reports, which countries have successfully implemented GPP and which were the ingredients of success?
Thank you very much, Basma. First of all, I want to say hello to everyone. Bonjour à tous. I want to start my response to the first question by saying that public procurement, which represents around 12% of GDP and up to 30% of government expenditure in OECD countries, so a tremendous place in the economy, is increasingly used as a strategic policy tool to generate environmental benefits and advance climate actions. So how it is used in OECD country? Well, first, countries are aligning their regulatory and policy frameworks to actually embed green procurement into broader climate strategies. In 2024, the OECD issued a report on harnessing public procurement for the green transition, which I am sharing with you right now over in the chat. And this report showcases the GPP practice of OECD countries based on a large survey that we circulated. According to this survey, 92% of OECD countries have adopted a national GPP policy framework, and 29 countries refer to GPP, or at least to public procurement, in their national environmental commitments as a tool for pursuing sustainability goals. So these alignments ensure coherence with international obligations, such as the Paris Agreement. Second, governments are actually setting clear targets and objectives to operationalize GPP. And it can be, let's say, we notice twofold in their practices. Some countries, like Italy, impose mandatory green criteria for specific high impacts product categories. So in Italy, it's actually covering 20 products, such as catering, textiles, and vehicles. And in other countries, the objectives do not concern specific products, but they set generalized targets across all procurement activities, aiming for a certain percentage of purchases to be green by a certain year. One example is France, with whom the OECD is closely working at the moment on GPP. France is actually requiring that every public procurement procedure to include environmental consideration by 2026. And it's mandated by the law called Climate and Resilience, La Loi Climat et Résilience, which is quite ambitious because it includes both award criteria, technical specifications, and contract clauses. Third, GPP actually helps generalize performance-based approaches. through the use of concrete tools such as life cycle costing tools and environmental labels. So these tools allow procurement decisions to reflect not just the upfront cost or the acquisition cost, but the broader environmental footprints of goods and services across their entire cycle, meaning production, use, and disposal phase. Finally, implementation support is also critical to making GPP a reality on the ground. So OECD countries have developed several practical tools to help public buyers apply these criteria effectively. For example, in Germany, the Competency Center for Sustainable Procurement, so-called KNB, provides federal and local procurement officers with training, guidance, and practical resources. So in summary, public procurement contributes to climate action, not just through policy declaration and commitments and objectives, but also through concrete mechanisms that drive implementation and shift markets toward sustainability. And regarding your second question, meaning which countries successfully applied GPP and what were the key ingredients, well, the same report that I just mentioned highlight that several OECD countries actually are very strong performers in implementing green public procurement. So instead of talking about specific countries, maybe I can talk about the key ingredients and then mention some countries as examples. So the first key ingredient, as I mentioned, is a strong political commitment. So embedding GPP into wider and environmental policies. Such as the French Climate and Resilience Law. The second one is effective coordination mechanisms, which help translate policy into action. So in 91% of OECD countries with GPP frameworks, coordination takes place through interministerial working group or formal committees, because for GPP to be effective, it's not enough to regulate public procurement. It needs to have an actual coordination with wider environmental policy. So Germany, for example, uses an interministerial structure to align procurement with broader environmental goals. Third, as I mentioned before, success is creating actual robust operational tools and support systems. This includes environmental criteria, eco-labels, life cycle costing tools, help desks, and competency center that help buyers assess the full environmental footprint of their products. The fourth one, which is also very important, is monitoring and evaluation systems to ensure transparency and to allow the identification of areas of improvement. Around 70% of OECD countries have monitoring frameworks for GPP. Although their scope vary. So Japan, Estonia, and the Netherlands use digital tools and self-evaluation platforms to track the application of green criteria. Fifth, and this is probably one of the most important key ingredients, it is capacity building, which is a cornerstone of effective GPP application. 87% of OECD countries offer GPP training, and it's delivered through various formats, including workshops, e-learning, and practical modules. Latvia, for example, has trained over 1,500 procurement professionals through seminars since 2015. And Korea regularly surveys procurement officials to identify training needs in the field of green public procurement. In France, once again, we are collaborating with the state procurement department to increase the capacity of state buyers in GPP, because this was identified as a main area of improvement in France to advance GPP and to reach this very ambitious target of 100% of public procurement, including GPP by 2026 that I mentioned before. Lastly, stakeholder and market engagement are also critical to align public demand with private sector capability. In Japan, the Green Purchasing Network brings together governments, business, civil society to promote and scale green procurement. So these elements, political will, institutional design, tools, training, monitoring, and market alignment are the foundation for a successful GPP implementation.
Thank you, Sandra, for this, if you want, hopeful track of thinking GPP, because you gave us the highlights and the overview of the key ingredients of success. So this is a recipe that maybe if all countries follow it will lead to a good result. Thank you very much. I will go to Ms. Lisbeth Cazier to go more into a deep dive on integrating practices, how to integrate GPP into procurement practices practically with really, if you want, the tools to do that. The institutional setup. Sandra talked about interministerial maybe framework to coordinate between stakeholders, to involve everybody. Is this the case for all countries, or there's any other type of setup that we need to consider? And also the tools that you recommend to use by government entity. If you can talk about governments like in countries, in developing countries, more than developed countries, countries that are similar to Lebanon, for example.
Yes, thanks a lot for this question. So maybe quickly on the institutionalization aspect. So we really follow what comes out of the research of the OECD as well, which is having a sort of interagency platform, working group, committee is certainly something that we've seen across many countries is working well. And the reason why that's so critical is, on the one hand, because the line ministries that are procuring large volumes of, I'm thinking infrastructure, roads, and Basma, you mentioned some of the priority areas for Lebanon, energy, water, transport, and solid waste, I believe you mentioned. They're all important line responsibilities to start designing and thinking what's the scope of what a procurement will look like. And it's really important that they are involved together with a Ministry of Finance and with public budget holders, as well as with where some of the technical expertise around what is green procurement in these different areas, which often sits within a Ministry of Environment, but equally can be sitting within the university context or research institute, civil society, etc. So I think interagency platforms, they definitely need to have a couple of critical government stakeholders, but ideally also include non-governmental entities so that you can kind of keep a check on what's the latest knowledge out there on what is actually green in those areas of spending. But I think typically in these mandates of interagency platforms, what's important there as well is that they have a clear terms of reference on what this group is now supposed to do. So I'm thinking, for example, in Lebanon, you have the new law since last year, but a lot of the delegation, implementation, practical guidelines are in development. And so it's interesting to think about convening such group that would have as terms of reference also to provide input into the practical implementation tools that will be developed, and to also have a place and a mechanism to monitor progress. I think that would typically be one of the elements that those interagency platforms also do. So that's on institutionalization. Now, going a little bit into the nitty-gritty of what procurement ultimately is. Procurement processes are at the end of the day a process where we need to have a procurer defining the scope of what will be procured, the development of technical specifications, the selection criteria, award criteria, and contract clauses related to the processes. And in each of these, what I call interventions in the traditional procurement process, there are opportunities for making them greener than what they are today. And I think it's important that we try to build capacity that support interventions in each of these areas. When you define the subject matter of what you're buying, that's already a place where you can indicate that you're signaling through simply putting in the scope elements around climate, elements around what's actually the purpose of this procurement, including sustainable development or making contributions to the sustainable development goals, to sustainable recovery and reconstruction. So in the definition of scope, there's opportunities to green that in a way. I think the most traditional place that we start to think about greening is in the area of technical specifications. And many countries have started developments around databases of criteria, of what are green criteria for different areas of public spending. We've seen those in some recent work we did in Indonesia, for example, that there's increasingly green product criteria development ongoing. Very often that's an effort led by a ministry or a department of environment, because they hold that kind of expertise on what is green and what's not. And also what's important in the development of such criteria is that there's no one size fits all, but it's really important to understand your current procurement market, like where are you buying from, what are your suppliers, what's the level of innovation that they could carry, so that when you put out tenders in the procurement process with green criteria, that you do get a response. And what's important there is to also find ways to have dialogues with suppliers outside of a specific procurement process for procurers and procurement authorities to be informed what's the latest innovation in terms of green in a specific sector. And so having a mechanism, including institutionally, for procurement authorities to have that kind of dialogue is an important piece of success for green public procurement. Now, there are also there's a database that I wanna I'll put in the chat in a moment, which I think is useful to go through. It's a database developed by the Irish Procurement Authority and derived from what the EU developed many years ago on what are green criteria in the area of furniture, in food and catering services, in construction, in lighting, etc. And the criteria in Ireland, the reason why I mentioned this database is because it's quite user-friendly. And I even often use it in training because it allows procurers to search through, for a specific area of spending, what are some of the technical criteria, what are award criteria, what are contract clauses. And they also provide a way to say, these are ideally minimum criteria that you'd want to include, and these are some of the optional criteria you might want to include. And again, this is adjusted to the Irish procurement system, of course, and to the procurement market. But in a way, it already provides an interesting baseline, if you look at that for Lebanon as well, to start understanding what are some of these green aspects in relation to the different areas of public spending. The other tool that I want to mention, and that while it doesn't have an application at the moment outside of Europe, has been part of our work in exploring in Indonesia, in South Africa, in India, as well as in the procurements that are supported through the multilateral development banks. And it's a tool called the CO2 performance ladder. And given that we are focusing our discussion today specifically on climate and procurement for climate action, I think it's worth mentioning this tool. And basically, the CO2 performance ladder, what it consists of is, on the one hand, and particularly for suppliers and contractors, it provides them a framework and a tool to manage their carbon emissions throughout their supply chain. And so it provides a framework to start tracking that, to be transparent about it, and to start setting some targets for emission reduction. The suppliers get certified on a specific, it's a ladder. So as the name indicates, you have ladders 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And depending on how ambitious a supplier is, they get certified on different steps of the ladder, with ladder 5 being the highest, the most ambitious suppliers, and then level 4, 3, 2, 1, lower ambitions in terms of carbon reduction. Now, why this tool is interesting is because it's not only a carbon management system, it's also a system that's easy to use in a procurement process. And that's the reason why I wanted to bring this up in our discussion today, because what's complicated in terms of applying green public procurement or undertaking that is that procurers have little time to get everything through the process. And so we need to develop and think about the development of tools from a perspective of the procurement authority that actually has to do it. And so here we have a tool that's been used as an award criteria to give an additional bonus to suppliers that are showing more ambition in relation to climate action. And so I think, and again, there is a lot more detail on this tool available. There's also a lot of guidance of the tool available in French. So if there's people in the audience who want a deeper dive, there's lots that can be done with this type of tool, but particularly with the type of mechanism. I see the question in the chat, and I'm going to pick it up if that's okay immediately in my response,
yes,
which is
sure.
What are the incentives that can encourage suppliers to innovate and offer actually low carbon products? And there's two things here. One, if government asks and provides rewards for the suppliers that are more ambitious when it comes to climate action, which you can do through your procurement processes, including through a tool like the CO2 performance ladder, then that's actually the incentive. It's the market, the pull, it's the demand trigger from the procurement process that will push suppliers to eventually find a market for their products. Now, we also have to be careful in the sense that that's not the only incentive a supplier will need. It's very important that around the green public procurement, there is a solid procurement system in place that also allows procurers and suppliers to work efficiently. Because a lot of suppliers, in some countries at least, there's pushback from them wanting to contract with governments because the processes might be slow and might be very cumbersome. So it's important that around the institutionalization of green procurement, there is also an efficient and effective procurement system. And there, I think we have to look into of course, e-procurement systems, which make it easier, both on the side of government as well as suppliers to contract with government. And so that would be an important, I would say, almost prerequisite for success as well, is to try to work on the digitalization of procurement. I'll just make one last point or one example that I want to provide, and then I can come back to that in the second piece of questions. Which is around the importance of being strategic around this agenda and for actually setting some targets. We've seen an interesting example from Lithuania, which actually, including at a political level, really put procurement forward as an important target to green. And so they put a target forward to have 100% green procurement that was committed to a few years ago, but in 5 years' time, all our procurements will be green with some incremental steps. And I think indicating the kind of direction that you want to go, that's actually a second incentive for suppliers because it gives market certainty around what you're going to buy in the future. And it indicates to your market that the products that were provided today are not going to be enough for in the future contracting with government. And so that kind of target setting is also a really important aspect of making this happen.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth, for all this insightful information, from the tools to the importance of the institutional setup, the importance of being strategic in thinking that in having a demand-driven public procurement in which the supplier can respond and prepare themselves. And here I would like to highlight a very important principle in our law. It's the planning and the integration with the budget. Because if we plan well public procurement, we can set all these targets and objectives from the planning stage when we publish our public procurement plan on a yearly basis and in a way that allows the market to prepare for what government entities are planning to procure. So the importance of procurement planning in this aspect is very, very important to consider and to work on. So thank you very much. We will get back at the end with a recap on the very important point and takeaways from our webinar. I will move to Professor Steven van Gars. Welcome again. And here I would like to go with you into also a deep dive into the diverse type of procurement between goods, works, and services, which GPP requirements are in favor of low carbon innovation and biodiversity, because we know that going green is going also to innovate and bringing something new to the market. So what are the GPP requirements in favor of innovation and biodiversity protection, if you have some examples also to share? And on market engagement, because you have a very extensive experience in public-private sphere, how can we engage the market to support green development of green markets and ensure that green public tenders are aligned with private suppliers' capacities and resources? Because we know also from if you want, from discourse, that green public procurement is something that will cost us more money. So we prefer not to go into it. So this also dilemma is important to highlight. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think, and also thank you for having me during this very interesting webinar. It's a real pleasure, and I think it's a very, very important topic. It was also the topic of a recent European financed Horizon 2020 project, the Sapiens project. It still has a website that you can access, where we had 10 PhDs who did research the last 4 or 5 years on sustainable and green procurement. Now, let me come to your questions. The first question is about the requirements and the way to organize green and climate-friendly procurement and to enhance CO2 reduction. I had prepared also an explanation on the CO2 performance ladder, but Lisbeth already explained it, so I can skip most of it. But I agree with Lisbeth that this is a very interesting, it's a very interesting tool. Although I have to warn people, don't start using this tool without preparation, because it is a challenging tool to use. You need to have skilled and trained people to use it, and you also need to interact with the market, because the market has to be ready to put in offers that are compliant with what you wish for. Maybe one thing that Lisbeth did not explain, and I can do it, is the way the instrument works out in practice. So Lisbeth already explained that it's a combination of management system, and that it uses award criteria. Now, of course, the question is, how does that work out in practice? And what you see is that the bidder will commit in its tender to achieve a certain CO2 ambition. So they will put that in their offer, and the determination of this level of CO2 ambition in the offer will result in a fictitious reduction of the tender price. And this reduced price is used to evaluate the award criteria price. So you basically evaluate all the prices of the bidders, and you take into account their CO2 reduction ambition. And then, of course, you will ask yourself, what happens? What happens if they don't do it? What happens if they don't comply with what they offered? Well, the CO2 ambition level must be reached no later than 1 year after the conclusion of the contract. Of course, if the duration of the contract extends over several years, the successful bidder must demonstrate within the months following each anniversary of notification that it has reached at least the level announced in its offer. And if they don't comply, if there is a failure to comply with the obligations to prove that the CO2 or the CO2 ambition as announced in the offer has been achieved, this will lead to special penalties. So basically, the instrument, it's to some extent a management system, and to some extent it's something you use during award, but it also has an important impact during the implementation of the contract, as if the CO2 reduction is not achieved, penalties will follow. So I think this CO2 performance ladder is a very interesting example, and you can use it to target CO2 reduction and to make companies more ambitious. But once again, don't implement it like that. You have to prepare it. Very carefully. Then maybe a second example that can be used to reduce carbon and protect biodiversity, because you also mentioned biodiversity, are the functional and technical specifications. I think Elisabeth also mentioned this, and I think she's right. We need to stress the importance of this element. For example, initiatives have already been taken in Belgium to use green procurement policies in order to promote goods that are less harmful to the environment. For instance, promotion of the use of wood products originating from sustainable forests, or inclusion of environmental, including biodiversity criteria in the procurement of, for example, coffee. Just to give you an example, also in coffee, you can push towards more biodiversity. And so biodiversity and CO2 friendly sourcing actually focus on the resources we use, and they need to be sourced in a way that avoids harming natural systems and promotes regenerative practices and reduction of CO2 where possible. So playing with the technical specifications is also very important. So we have already the award criteria, the performance ladder. We have the technical specifications. And then a third example, which I think is really important, is focusing on circular economy. And this has not yet been mentioned, but I think if you organize procurement as a circular public procurement, you can also achieve a lot of the goals you want to reach. I think circular procurement is really a key approach to making transformative changes in the production and consumption systems. And during the circular procurement, you can also focus on biodiversity. Because of course, reducing primary resource demand can be achieved by increasing efficiency of our resources and materials use through circular economy actions, such as extending projects' lifespans, recycling materials, etc., etc. So reducing the demand for primary resources will lower the pressure on biodiversity. So this third example is about the way we procure. And my idea is that we should try to make our procurement as circular as possible. Then maybe one short last point on your second question, and it is the interaction with the market. What I would suggest is that if you set up new innovative procurements, that you organize open market consultations. So before launching a tender, you go to the market and you organize an open dialogue between the procurer and the market, in which the procurer asks for the view of the market to identify the ability of the needs of the procurers. Of course, you have to organize this in a transparent way, in a way that equal treatment is complied with and that you don't have discrimination afterwards. But I think an open market consultation is a very good instrument to interact with the market before the tender and to align the needs to what is available on the market, and also to clarify the ambitions that a government might have.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree with you for the point on circular economy, because circular public procurement, this is used in Europe, but it's somehow very new to our region. Recycle and reuse, not only recycle. So maybe it's a concept that we need to dig more into it and to read more about, so we can do some research. If you can share some resources on that in the chat or after the webinar, it would be great for us to share with our audience. Thank you very much for all these insights, Dr. Stephen. So now time is to open the floor for question and answers from our audience. So anyone who would like to intervene or to say a comment or have a question, please go ahead by raising hand or by writing in the chat. I see that we have some questions in the chat. Let me take them. And if anyone would like to intervene, please raise your electronic hand. I have a question from Mu'tasim Al-Haj Sulaiman. How can procurement officers be trained to apply life cycle costing or environmental evaluation criteria? So if anyone could, Elizabeth, maybe if you have any reply to this question about life cycle costing.
So it depends a little bit, I think, on the it's almost, I think, a question for where are the current opportunities for procurers to get training on public procurement in general, and to check the extent to which and of course, Basma, the collaboration we had last year, for example, I think includes also modules around life cycle costing and green public procurement in general. So there are a couple of programs. There's also increasingly support from the World Bank and regional development banks in terms of capacity building, professionalization of procurement. And usually these days, green procurement, including with a focus on life cycle costing, is part of such courses. So that's maybe one answer. And then in terms of what are good environmental evaluation criteria, I'd really encourage participants to check out some of these database links that exists, because I think depending on what you are buying, the type of technical criteria, award criteria are going to look different. And that is, for example, one thing what makes green procurements sometimes complex to implement, because for those who are buying and procuring for road infrastructure projects, it's very different if you're active in a hospital or school and buying medical equipment or furniture. So that's where these databases, I think, are important.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. So you can check the databases. There are already a lot of efforts done that we can build on and we can learn from and customize to Lebanon. So let's build on what we have and take it from there. So I have a question also on circular procurement from Micheline Mbarak. Is the circular procurement related to life cycle costs of products, for example? Maybe you could clarify a little bit the concept of circular procurement.
Yes, yes, I will take this question. I will make available a recent report that we have written at the university. It was commissioned by the Flemish government. It's a comparative report on circular public procurement with a focus, of course, on Belgium and Flanders, which is the largest region within Belgium. But it is also comparative as it compares the situation of circular public procurement with other European countries. So I will make it available as soon as I find it. I will try via the chat, and if I don't find it, I will send it afterwards so that it can be spread. But it is true that there is a connection between life cycle costing and circularity, of course. The idea in many circular procurements is, well, first of all, when you set up a procurement, a public contract, when you want to buy something, the first question, of course, is about the needs. Do you need something that is actually totally new, or do you have already maybe things that can be reused and adapted? So the first question, basically, in the circular economy and in circular public procurement is, what do you actually need? Do you need something completely new, or maybe can you go along with like pre-owned things, or can you reuse things that you already have? Another element that is used in circular public procurement is the fact that in your tender documents, oftentimes you will require measures that will make the lifespan of the product longer. For example, you will require that the product can be repaired. I think you all might remember the time where we had mobiles with batteries in it, and if the battery, if there was an issue with the battery, we had to throw away the mobile phone. Nowadays, more and more products can be repaired. You can switch the battery. And this is of course the circular economy, and as a government you have a responsibility. You can steer on this and you can say, you know, I want to buy products that can be repaired in a very easy way, in a not so costly way. So that is also something that you can do in circular public procurement. And maybe and so this has also of course to do with the life cycle of the product, because if you take such a measure, the life cycle of the product gets extended. And then sometimes, of course, it's not possible to extend the life cycle of a product or a work maybe, but components can have a new life after their use. And that is also what you see sometimes in practice. For example, when a work is commissioned by the government using public procurement, a public contract, that the government says, you know, after a time, maybe 10, 15 years, you have to decommission the work, and the components need to be taken back, and you need to reuse them. You have to give them another life. And this is also a way you can organize the circular economy. You can push the circular economy, and of course, by working in such a way, there is less pressure on raw materials. So all of these elements have to do with the life cycle of goods and products. Sometimes you extend this life cycle. Sometimes you give the product or the work a new life after a given term.
Thank you, Dr. Steven, for this clarification. I still have some questions to deal with. So we have Mohammed Sheikh, who is asking about the role of the Ministry of Environment in achieving the green transformation based on other countries' experience, and the Ministry of Finance as well. And what role could the Public Procurement Authority play achieving this goal? The Public Procurement Authority is the new regulatory authority of the procurement system that we have established in Lebanon. In the new public procurement law, the Public Procurement Authority is operational now, but is facing several challenges in terms of capacity and of having the needed staff to be operational fully, as mentioned in the law. But we have a public procurement authority. It's a new authority in place, and the role of other ministries. So maybe you could have an answer on that, Sanda or Elizabeth.
Maybe I can try to give some elements and then give the floor to
Yes,
Elizabeth.
please.
But what is the role of the Ministry of Environment and what is the role of the Ministry of Finance? Well, both are extremely important in devising GPP policies, because considering the expertise needed to define ambitious and coherent objectives, both expertise are needed. The Ministry of Environment will say, well, we need to achieve, you know, a certain percentage of GHG emission reduction by a certain year. And then the Ministry of Finance, who's usually in most OECD countries in charge of public procurement policy, will say, well, to help you achieve this objective, we will try to do this and this and this. This is why, as I mentioned before, most countries rely on coordination among the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Finance, and maybe other ministries as well, who are in charge of large pools of expenses in public procurement. So really and what could be the role of public procurement authority? Well, I'm not sure about its mandate, but obviously if goals are established regarding GPP in Lebanon, then maybe Lebanon could follow the example of these other OECD countries and create an ad hoc working group or interministerial working group or interbody working group, like it was the case in other countries, to really enact a GPP policy that is tailored to the objectives of the countries and also the means, the capacity of the country.
Thank you, Sanda, for this answer. I would like just to clarify about the role of the PPA. The PPA is the new regulatory authority that was in place since the law entered into force. It has a lot of mandate related to policy formulation, to supervision of the system, to data gathering, reporting, and to coordinating all this policy issue related to procurement. It has a main mandate to issue policy, public procurement policy, to propose them to the Council of Ministers and the Council of Ministers to approve them and issue them. So the sustainability issue, the sustainability public procurement or the green public procurement, if we need to have this ingredient of success, which is the political commitment at the level of the government, we have to have a GPP or a sustainable public procurement policy that set the targets at the medium and long term, and then that could be broken down into more technical, if you want, operating groups or technical committees to be in charge of putting in place this policy. So this is just to clarify the mandate of the PPA. It has the responsibility of issuing policies, and other ministries and other stakeholders have the responsibility to bring in their expertise and to be part of this national dialogue.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question from our colleague at the Electricité de Liban, Antoine Barros. He's asking about how much the procurement processes influenced by established and implemented environmental and social management systems.
I can maybe quickly jump in here. So
Yes.
what you can do in your procurement process is require suppliers to have an environmental management system and scheme in place. So I think, again, what's critical is that we're currently globally, despite the fact that we have seen a lot of progress actually in the last 10 years when it comes to sustainable and green public procurement. The survey of the OECD very often shows that as well. All the trends are in upward direction, but still we see a large volumes of procurement not using the power that they have to actually demand those systems or to demand environmental criteria in relation to spending. So I think the suppliers that have those systems in place will be at an advantage. And it comes to your point, Basma, that what's critical, of course, is to have planning in place so that the market knows that this will be required in the future.
Yes, thank you very much, Elizabeth, for this clarification. I see a lot of interesting material in the chat shared by our experts, so thank you very much. I will also make sure that we can reshare and communicate this after the webinar with all those who attended. Thank you very much again. So if there are no more questions now, I will continue my my questions and the panel discussion, and then I will leave the floor for the end for another Q&A slot for our participants. So back to Sanda, OECD, with a question now about, we know that 92% of countries that are surveyed by the OECD, according to a report, have set mandatory GDP requirement and targets, but they are not always compliant. So countries are not compliant with what targets they put. What are your recommendations at the level of OECD for them to comply better? And how can public institutions or agencies demonstrate that they are a driving force in the green transition? In another term, how to face these challenges and be more compliant?
Okay, thank you very much, Basma. As you just said, while most OECD countries have adopted very ambitious green public procurement strategy, reporting still remains a weak point, because it is very nice to have very ambitious objectives and indicators, etc. But if you're not monitoring the results of these strategies and its impact on the environment, what's really the point of having a GPP strategy, right? So governments usually face practical obstacles such as limited tools, insufficient human and financial resources, or fragmented data system to perform the monitoring of these strategies. So to address this gap, it is crucial that public authorities develop institutionalized reporting frameworks. This includes defining the exact indicators that contracting authorities need to report on, identify reliable data sources, and setting out reporting timelines and format. These frameworks should not be limited to central government, because in many OECD countries, from the survey that I mentioned before, reporting is only mandatory for central government authorities. But rather, this should also apply to subnational and sectoral entities to ensure comprehensive coverage. But reporting alone is not enough. Once you have a report, countries should use this monitoring report to identify and address bottlenecks in implementation of the strategy. And there is a practical example coming from Lithuania that Lisbeth mentioned before. So Lithuania, after failing to meet its GPP target of 50% of all procedures in 2019, the government decided to launch a full reform of its procurement system, which including revising the legislation and introducing a clear roadmap with measurable milestones. So this is an example of how monitoring and evaluation helps push forward reforms and policy improvements. So as a result, GPP rose significantly, reaching nearly 60% in value in 2022. For monitoring to be effective, we mentioned it before, you need to have a robust digital infrastructure and skilled personnel. E-procurement system, such as Estonia's, which integrates actual environmental criteria tracking directly into the national e-procurement platform, can help streamline data collection and improve compliance. Other countries like the Netherlands rely on self-evaluation tools to collect procurement data. You can also use periodic surveys and evaluation to capture qualitative insights, especially from agencies that really underperform, or from suppliers, including SMEs who may face barriers to participation. Another way to improve compliance with the goals is to maybe put in place incentives and recognition mechanisms to really reward strong performance and motivate lagging institutions. In Korea, for example, public bodies receive annual bonuses based on GPP performance. So the better they perform, the more budget they receive for the next year. In Japan, they have GPP awards, so it's a non-financial incentive, but they receive GPP awards for good performance on green public procurement. Finally, after your reporting, after you've measured and you've created your report, another important effort is measuring and communicating environmental outcomes, which includes reporting on, for example, greenhouse gas emissions, which were avoided, reduction in energy or resource use, and other measurable sustainability impacts, because when results are publicly communicated, they increase institutional accountability and build trust with citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanda, for this information about the importance of monitoring and reporting in public procurement, and in showing the progress, and in showing where things are working, where things need to be enhanced and improved, whether through legislation or through practice. Back to Lisbeth, please, on this important issue of monitoring and of gathering data. I count on you to give us also some tools and some experiences on effectively monitoring the impact of GPP. And what about capacity building and how we can close the national gap, skill gap, not only at the public sector level, but also at the private sector level, to get both sectors aligned with these national targets?
Yeah, thank you. I have to make sure I don't miss your last question, so I'm quickly taking notes. So on the monitoring side, so I think I'll just follow up on what Sanda just illustrated, and I'll put a resource in the chat as well, which is a study that we did where we looked at some examples of how monitoring on green public procurement has been done, and particularly trying to look beyond towards that impact monitoring. And when I mention impact monitoring, it's exactly the last point that Sanda highlighted. So there's different things we can think about, right? When we monitor progress on GPP, and typically we say well, either you look at how has it been institutionalized, how many action plans are there, how many policies are in place, how frequently are they revised, etc. And including also how many capacity building programs has a government set up. That's kind of one bucket of measuring progress. And then, and I think that's where we've seen most advances, thankfully, is kind of what I call the output level. So at the level of the procurement process, how many tenders have there been that included green criteria? How many suppliers or how many demands with eco labels were made, etc. So really looking at the nitty-gritty of the procurement process. And there are huge data challenges today in that area. And we really need digital and e-procurement systems to be working well, but also to be talking to each other. So I fully echoes Sanda's point on we actually see that often only happening at a central level, but actually so much of procurement happens subnationally and happens in entities that are covered under the procurement law, but not monitored as such. And it's a huge gap. So really something that I think in Lebanon is now critical as you are rolling out the implementation of the new law, that aspect is taken into account. But then I think what we really need to do to set ourselves up for success is to do that monitoring of the actual impact. Are we actually reducing emissions based on what we are procuring today, what we will be procuring in 5 years' time? Because that is ultimately the important area to be able to judge, have we used procurement strategically? And there we see only sporadic examples. And so in the report that I shared, the one I'll just zoom into is the one in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, where they have gone to the area of ultimately measuring what were the emission savings generated for 7 product categories. And so basically what the procurement agency did is they made it mandatory for 25, I believe, government ministries and agencies to implement GPP, but also required and made sure there was a designated focal point for GPP in those ministries to submit annual progress plans. And again, so it's very important that in a GPP strategy and action plan, that element of monitoring is there, but that you also have those designated focal points that actually have to feed the data back to, in this case, the central procurement authority. Then there was a huge data collection effort done at the central level. And I think we don't have to underestimate this. As much as we want to centralize a lot of that through the digital systems, there were still a lot of manual checks on that progress of 7 product categories that were benchmarked against a baseline of what the non-green conventional products emission looked like. And then they looked at how much of the better emission, well, a lower emission product, how much of that was bought. And like that, they could calculate ultimately the savings in CO2. So again, these are points of data that need to be collected from various sources. And you also need to do some benchmarking depending on the product categories. It's an approach that they've also used in Japan, if I'm not mistaken. But again, detailed information is in the report, where you look at a kind of a pool of product categories that are typically high energy intensive, for example, and then you start putting a baseline in place and you let calculations run to be able to track whether emissions based on your procurement are actually decreasing. But it does require time and resources and digital infrastructure to put that in place in a way that you're credibly generating data. And I think important to emphasize that even at the level of the EU, where they're trying to harmonize procurement data collection in something that they call the public procurement data data space. Even there, what we are seeing is there is a lot of data. There are a lot of data gaps within that system, and so I think there's an opportunity to roll that out with some of the lessons learned, which is making sure there is a harmonized data collection and data capture system and expertise to be able to calculate emission savings. Just coming back to the workings of these interagency working groups and committees, this is of course where the Ministry of Environment can also support and play a role to provide some of that baselining. But the interagency platform can also serve as a place where to discuss the results of these monitoring efforts to then be able to take some actions on what to improve moving forward. To your question on training and then how to fill the skill gap, well, I think you are filling it exactly in this moment by organizing a webinar series and by looking at kind of strategic plans for capacity building. So that's definitely important. We've also seen some examples, and that's actually dates back from my early work at ISD in the Latin American and Caribbean countries, where there were a lot of roadshows done by the procurement authority to go to different regions in country to train both procurers, but also market participants. So there were fairs organized and dialogues with different sectors to highlight basically how to engage in procurement processes with government, and also on how to green them. And that's basically also a way to use some capacity building and training towards suppliers, and having those dialogues in a way also serve as capacity building. The other is to look for collaborations with universities and academic institutions. And then I think Steven mentioned this earlier, is the, or Sanda, I don't recall, but the setup that some countries have around having some centers where, like in Germany, where capacity building and also some help desk service type piece can actually be provided to procurers. And I think that's also a way to close certain skills gaps, because this is a space that will continuously move forward and innovate. Like what is green today, in 5 years, there will be new innovations, there will be better products on the market. So it's also about building a knowledge management system around public procurement. And that can be done either through government agencies, but it can also be through independent agencies. It really depends on the country context, I think.
Yes, thank you very much. This point on capacity building, I would just like to reiterate, yes, the Institute is mandated by the law to do all the capacity building on public procurement to accompany the reform, and sustainable procurement and green procurement is one of the important topics that are on our training plan this year. So I would like here to gladly announce that there will be a specified and specialized course on sustainability and green procurement by the end of the year, available to all procurers, alongside all the awareness raising sessions we are doing. We have been integrating this in our training courses across the years, but not in a specialized module. So now we are going more into details, into technicalities of this sustainable procurement with this new model that will be available by the end of the year. And also, I would like to announce here, just to take one moment, that we will be opening soon, in a few weeks, the applications to our second year collaboration with the University of Rome Tor Vergata on this certification program in procurement, where we have also a module in the program dedicated to sustainable public procurement, and this is one of our relevant speakers in this program. So there will be also an opportunity for public procurers to apply to this program and to get important insights and knowledge about this topic more and more. So these are the new two new announcements I would like to share. This is on capacity building. So thank you, Elizabeth. I will move to Dr. Stephen with a final question before taking the Q&A. From your experience, from all what you have seen in other countries, could you leave us with the practical recommendations, steps for Lebanon specifically, to transition from really traditional procurement, like the way we do now, to climate smart or to climate friendly procurement that will meet secondary policy objective and protect our environment?
Yes, thank you, Basma, for your question. It's an interesting question, and I think well, it has already been mentioned. I think, of course, key will be the cooperation, the networking, and the capacity building. And it is really important that there is a dedicated network-based competence center. And I hear that you are going to do this task in the future and work upon what you have already achieved. And I think this is so crucial to do this transformation. And what I also think is really important, and congratulations for that, is the cooperations also with Tor Vergata. I think educating people and getting the right skills is also crucial for this transformation at a local level, because without the right people, it will be very, and without the skills, it will be very, very difficult to do such a transformation. And for the rest, as you saw already in the chat, many links have been shared on documents that are available and that can be very helpful to do this transformation. And let me pinpoint one really interesting document, quite recent document, that fully answers all your questions in this respect. The UNECE published a guide on green and sustainable PPP procurement. Now, it's focused on public-private partnerships, but this document has also relevance for traditional public procurement and for green public procurement and for innovation procurement. So it has a broader scope than just the PPPs. The guide seeks to identify and develop policy and practical recommendations for governments to voluntarily adopt, review, and integrate green and sustainable procurement practices at national and local level. And also, where possible, it identifies best practices and elaborates on approaches that public officials implement in PPP projects and traditional green and sustainable public contracts. And what is also interesting with this guide, and I think this is also important when you will be working on the transformation, that the guide delves into each phase of a project. Because of course, once again, we discussed public procurement, but basically in public contracts, you also have three stages. You have the identification stage, the preparatory stage, the development stage, and the implementation stage of your contract. And for each of the stages, this document discusses the relevant steps that authorities need to take. And just to give you some examples, if you look at this guide for the identification stage, one of the recommendations is to strengthen the capacity and to take advantage of the opportunities of sustainable public procurement, to fully embrace this. Also to create clear policies. This was already mentioned by Sanda and by Lisbeth. It's really important that you have a long-term clear policy so that for private partners, private bidders, it's clear that there is an engagement, commitment. And then what is also, I think, important is use economic incentives to promote the green and sustainable transition. So besides public procurement, if possible, also try to implement tax incentives, for example, and this will speed up the transformation. Maybe another thing really important, I think also for you guys, is stakeholder engagement. you need everybody on board, and for this you need to engage all stakeholders. So also for you as an institution, I think it's really important to grasp that component. Now, as to the development stage, the actual procurement, I think good pre-qualification criteria, technical specifications, we all discussed it. I think it's really important. But honestly, especially as to selection and exclusion, you do not want to deal with companies that have a history of harming the environment. So this is really important to integrate that in your model documents, in your trainings, in your templates, etc., etc. And then we already discussed it, integrate life cycle assessment and total cost of ownership considerations in the models and the templates. I think it's also a very important one. And then maybe a last one, the implementation stage. One thing that could also be useful as you're moving forward is, consider including third-party verification throughout the project. So third parties can verify maybe green or sustainable claims, and this reduces the risk also of greenwashing. And on the other hand, by involving third-party verification on the project, this can also ensure that the project is standard in a transparent and fair and objective way. And this is of course good for trust, because you need a lot of trust when you do such transformations. Trust from all stakeholders, private companies, but also taxpayers, because in the end, of course, public procurement is about spending public money, and so it's really important that trust is available in all chains. That is what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Dr. Steven, for the great recap on the important points and for also opening the door to sustainable public procurement, public-private partnerships project, where also there is the procurement part of it that we have to consider. Thank you very much. Here, I would like to open the floor very quickly in 5 minutes to any of our esteemed participants who would like to add a comment or ask a final question to our speakers before we get to the end of our webinar. Anyone has a question or a comment? We would be happy to hear you.
Hi, Basma. Sorry, I can't find raise hands.
No problem, Diana. Yes, welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the webinar. It's really interesting. I would like to know about the data collection. I mean, obviously, it does need solid technical infrastructure, but what about the data that we are after? Because sometimes we see some public procurement authorities, they go ahead and collect data that can expire immediately. So I think that collecting a lot of data is not the right thing, but how do you plan to collect the right data? Is there any guideline of what data public authorities should be collecting and why? And thank you. And I would appreciate this report that Stephen has mentioned about guidelines on public. If we can please receive either a link or the title of it so that we can get to read it. Thank you very much.
So about data, please, who would like to answer this question? Maybe Lisbeth or Sanda on data?
I can jump in first. So it really depends on what indicator your measure, like you want to measure, and that's where and we don't have time, I think, to go in detail. The data sources will depend on that. So if I think about the outcome indicators, so we want to track how are we doing in terms of GHG emissions, or how are we doing in terms of environmental benefits like air pollution or less waste production, etc. one thing is to review product attributes of what is being bought. But the type of data that certainly needs to be collected and is actually also not necessarily an easy task is how much of a certain product has been bought over a certain period of time, and or what were the characteristics of those products. So I'm not sure about the comment that was made on some data expires really quickly. I'm not entirely sure there what an example might be, but I think having the basic data on how many procedures were done with environmental criteria being considered, for example, even that type of data is sometimes hard to collect these days. And so that's where you need some streamlined processes in place to actually collect some of that basic information before you can start measuring, well, what does that then mean in terms of the outcomes, in terms of GHG emission reductions. So I don't know if Sandra wants to jump in on this one as well.
Sure, I'm just going to complement this quickly. This is actually a very important question when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, because the main data source for measuring GPP is usually the national e-procurement system. However, it is not always perfect. One example that we have was in one of the projects we're implementing with France. In their e-procurement system, they actually have an option to tick the box if the procurement process contains GPP, whether it's a word criteria or technical specification, etc. However, when we did our fact-finding missions with the different buyers, they told us sometimes we do not tick the box, even though they actually included a GPP, parameter, and vice versa. Sometimes they tick the box, even though the parameter they included cannot be considered as GPP. So sometimes it doesn't give like a realistic image, the data collected of the implementation of the GPP strategy. So besides this statistical data coming from the e-procurement system, we can think of other ways to collect the data, including through surveys or any other means, really, to complement this and to bring in qualitative data. Because if you can include and tick the box, but does this really produces effects on the environment? And this is the question to think about. First, the indicators, and then how to collect the data.
Thank you, Sandra and Lisbeth, for the additions and the importance of setting the indicators ahead of time before collecting the data, to be able to know what aspect to measure and what impact we need to show. We have a raising hand from Muhammad Ayubi. Please go ahead quickly, because our time is getting to end.
Yes, hello everyone.
Thank you.
I want to highlight something, please, that there are many studies that have been done in the private sector related to rather than the public sector. These studies are related to the green supply chain management and how we can apply the green supply chain management to many other variables. So the regulation of the public sector can rely on them in order to issue new regulation and new rules related to the public procurement. Over.
Thank you for your comment and addition. Anyone else who'd like to complement or to add any comment before we close our webinar? So thank you very much, everyone, for staying until 4:30 this afternoon, listening to our green procurement discussion. I would like to quickly, in less than 1 minute, do a quick wrap up on recapping the important points we raised in our webinar. So the ingredients for green public procurement, to put it on track, is to have the political will and commitment, to set targets at the national level, to have policies, to have an inter-ministerial or inter-agency coordination mechanism as an institutional setup, to have the robust tools, databases, help desk, to build also the monitoring capacity, to put the indicators, to collect data, to have the digital platform and infrastructure in place to be able to sustain this, to build national capacities, whether in the public or in the private sector, to align and streamline the efforts, to engage into a need assessment from time to time as well in order to focus more on closing the gap. Also, as a very important point mentioned, is to investigate and know more about circular public procurement and the important opportunities it could offer to government agency and to the private sector. And at the end, reporting and showing the outcomes, showing the impact of our green public procurement policies and strategies. These are the takeaways and the important points raised in our webinar. Thank you again. I would like to thank our speakers for being with us, for sharing their experience, inputs, and really rich resources with us. Lisbeth Kazier from the IISD, Dr. Steven Vangaards from Belgium, and Ms. Sanda Zugo from our partner OECD. As usual, thank you very much for being with us for this webinar this afternoon, and we hope to meet you again on other occasions. The webinar will be put on YouTube channel for further reference. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you for the Institute team, Rana, Josiane, Jid, who are with me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.